Hi, I'm Rausch, and this is my CO2 Dragster project. This presentation is sponsored by Heaps Haunted Corn Maze and Togas. The first task I had to tackle was the research. In doing this, I completed a research document to understand the basics of aerodynamics. Some important basics of aerodynamics include air and wind flow, lift, drag, friction, mass, and force. And here are simply some pictures illustrating some of these basics. Along with the research document, I also had to look up different designs for inspiration. Here's the first design that I found, here's some other ones, and here's the final group of designs that I found. The next task I had was to create the sketches and models. The first part of this involved sketching not only the original parts, but also the custom parts, mainly the body. So here are my original sketches. As you can see, they're all dimensioned with center lines. And when it came to the tires, I also had to use section views to properly show all the detail. Then here are my custom sketches. As you can see, it's mainly the body that I adjusted. And then after that, I jumped onto Inventor and created 3D models of each part. So first, here are all 7 of the finished printed sheets. There's a lot to print and staple and fold. This is the cover sheet, complete with a render. This is the exploded body assembly with the parts listed. This is the body, and as you can see from my custom one, I decided to add a hollowed out section of the car. In hopes to reduce weight. Here is the back tire and straw. And as with the earlier sketch, I had to include a section view to get all the details. This is the CO2 cartridge and the axles. With the axles, I estimated the length that I would need to cut the axles. This is the front tire, washer, and eye screw. I once again used a section view to show the proper detail. And finally, I included some renders of the completed assembly. My next task was construction. This involved cutting, sanding, painting, and assembling. I first worked on the cutting. I had to trace the car design onto the wood prior to using the bandsaw and drilling the axle holes. And while cutting some of the sharper curves as shown here, I had to cut what's called relief cuts to ensure that the saw blade did not bend and possibly break. And then after getting the rough shape of the body, I decided that the hollowed out section of the body would go all the way through. So this included drilling starting holes with the hand drill and then using the coping saw to cut out the shape. As you can see, this is progress with the coping saw, and that's why those holes would be there. That way I could run the saw blade through there and then by hand cut it out. This is finally all done with the coping saw. That piece of wood is officially my favorite piece of wood on earth because that was a pain in the butt to get out. And then here is the car completely finished after all of the cutting. Along with the body, I also had to cut down the front axle. So, as you can see here, I had to find the length of the axle using magical math, and it ended up being 2.41 inches in length. I then went through the process of sanding. The first picture is after completing all my sanding in the wood shop using the orbital sander, which I used for the inside curves, as well as the belt sander, which I used for the outside curves. The second picture is after I completed the hand sanding. This involves starting with the 60 grit sandpaper, then moving down to the 100 grit sandpaper, and finally the 240 grit sandpaper. I also sanded the inside cut to ensure a cleaner look, as well as the edges to just give it an overall sleeker design. I then moved on to painting. This first picture is after my first paint session. This is after my second paint session. This is after my final paint session. After all the painting and cutting and sanding was done, I moved on to the assembly. I first had to find where I should place the eye screws, so I found the center of my car using the dial caliber, and then used the compass to make a mark in the wood for where those would go. And then here are all the different parts of my dragster laid out and ready for assembly. In the back, you can see one of our sponsors' logo, Heaps Haunted Corn Maze. And then here are a few pictures of my completed dragster. And then once this was all finished, we were finally ready for the races. Here is the official 2019 CO2 Dragster race bracket. My race was the first race of the bracket. These are all the cars that competed in the bracket. And so we first started with a weigh-in. My car came in at 187.8 grams. Here is my dragster ready in the gate for its first race, which is shown in this next video. As you can see, I won that race, and after winning that race, I moved on to going against Drew. My dragster is once again shown ready for its second race, which is detailed in this video. Unfortunately, that race ended my dragster's career, but it still raced rather well. This final picture is of not only all the cars, but also of their creators. You can see, once again, one of our sponsors is in the picture, which are Co2. And then finally, here's a copy of the official final bracket. Cynthia was the 2019 CO2 Dragster champion. Overall, this project was extremely fun because we got to go through the engineering processes as well as work hands-on with seeing it through. One major improvement that I would make, though, is shortening the body of the wedge to take away even more weight. But I must say, for being a rather heavy car, the wedge performed very well.